The sun was shining. Birds were singing. It was a perfect Sunday for a picnic in the park. Alex and his friends were sprawled out on a checkered blanket, laughing and sharing stories. Sandwiches, chips, and lemonade were laid out before them. The air was filled with the sweet scent of freshly cut grass. Alex took a bite of his sandwich and looked around at his friends. He felt content. Life was good. He closed his eyes and let the warmth of the sun wash over him. These were the moments he cherished. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a stark contrast to the peaceful surroundings. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was his mother. "Excuse me a moment," he said to his friends. "It's my mother. I should take this." They nodded in understanding, their laughter continuing as he walked a short distance away to answer the call. The phone call ended and Alex turned back towards his friends, but as he did, a shiver ran down his spine. Something was wrong. The laughter, the chatter, the sounds of life that were so vibrant just moments ago were gone. An eerie silence had descended upon the park. He called out to his friends, his voice echoing strangely in the stillness. "Guys, this isn't funny anymore." But there was no reply. Panic began to rise in his chest, tightening its grip with each passing second. Where could they have gone? They couldn't have gone far. He ran back to the picnic blanket, his heart pounding in his ears. But the blanket was gone. The food, the laughter, his friends, everything had vanished. He stood there, alone in the eerie silence, the phone slipping from his grasp and clattering onto the grass. The park seemed different now, the colors muted, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. It was as if someone had hit the mute button on the world. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a sense of dread that settled deep in his stomach. He felt a chill despite the warm sun still shining above. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Had his friends decided to play a cruel joke? No, it was too elaborate, too real. His gaze darted around the park, searching for any sign, any clue, anything that could explain what had happened. His scientific mind, usually his anchor in times of uncertainty, offered no solace. Time travel, alternate dimensions, these were concepts he had only read about in science fiction novels, not something he ever expected to encounter in his own life. He called out for his friends again, his voice cracking with desperation. "This isn't funny, where are you?" Only silence answered him. The sun, which had seemed so cheerful just moments ago, now felt like a watchful eye, judging his every move. He sank to his knees, his mind reeling. He was alone, completely alone. The world he knew, the life he had, seemed to have vanished into thin air. The park, once a sanctuary of joy and laughter, now felt like a desolate wasteland, a stark reminder of all that he had lost. He couldn't stay in the park. It was too painful, a constant reminder of his vanished friends. He had to find help, find someone who could explain what had happened. He had to find his friends. With a newfound determination, he picked himself up and started walking. The streets outside the park were deserted. Cars sat abandoned in the middle of the road, their engines cold and silent. Houses stood empty, doors left ajar as if their occupants had left in a hurry. The world was holding its breath, frozen in a moment of eerie stillness. The further he walked, the more unsettling the world became. The buildings seemed to crumble and decay before his very eyes, their once bright facades now covered in a layer of dust and grime. The air grew thick with the smell of something acrid and unfamiliar, a smell that spoke of neglect and decay. The world was transforming into something he didn't recognize, something out of a nightmare. The sun, now a hazy orb in the sky, cast long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like living things. He felt a growing sense of unease, as if he were walking deeper and deeper into a forgotten corner of the world. Section 5. A Glimmer of Hope. The Distant Town. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed to have lost all meaning in this strange new reality. Just as despair began to consume him, he saw it, a flicker of light in the distance. Hope surged through him, a beacon in the darkness. Gathering the last vestiges of his strength, he stumbled towards the light. As he drew closer, the outline of a town slowly came into view. It wasn't much, just a cluster of buildings huddled together against the encroaching darkness, but it represented a glimmer of hope in a world that had seemingly lost all hope. Even from a distance, he could see it was a town in chaos. Fires raged unchecked, casting an eerie orange glow against the twilight sky. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of distant screams. It was a scene of utter devastation, yet it filled him with a strange sense of relief. It was a sign of life, a sign that he wasn't alone in this nightmare. He walked faster now, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. As he approached the town, he could see figures moving amidst the flames. They were human figures, their silhouettes outlined against the inferno. He had found other survivors. He wasn't alone. Section 6. Encounter with the Law, a Policeman's Tale. He reached the outskirts of the town, his throat dry and his body aching. The chaos was almost overwhelming. Buildings were reduced to rubble, the streets littered with debris. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burning. He coughed, waving his hand in front of his face to clear the air. A figure emerged from the smoke, his uniform singed and torn, a look of weary determination on his face. He was a policeman, his badge glinting in the firelight. He held up a hand, his voice hoarse but firm. "Hold it right there! What brings you to our town on a night like this?" Alex stumbled towards him, desperate for answers. "Where is everyone? What happened here?" His voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. The policeman regarded him with a mixture of pity and sadness. He had seen too much tonight, experienced a horror that words could barely express. It happened so fast, the policeman began, his voice low and grave. One minute, everything was normal, and the next, he shook his head, unable to find the words to describe the indescribable. It was as if the world itself had turned against us. Section 7. The Tragic Truth. Dust to dust. The policeman led him towards a makeshift shelter, a haven from the chaos that raged outside. Inside, huddled figures whispered amongst themselves, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. The air was heavy with the weight of their shared trauma. He listened intently as the policeman recounted the horrific events that had unfolded. It was a wave of energy, he explained, his voice trembling slightly. Invisible, silent, but with a power unlike anything I've ever seen. It swept through the town, and those caught in its path, they just vanished. Vanished? Alex echoed, his mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the situation. But where did they go? The policeman pointed to a fine layer of dust that coated everything, a silent testament to the tragedy that had befallen the town. They didn't go anywhere, he said quietly. They became this. Alex stared at the dust clinging to his hand, a cold realization washing over him. This dust, so fine, so insignificant, was all that remained of the people he knew, the people he loved, his friends, his family, his entire world, reduced to nothing more than dust. A sob escaped his lips, a raw, primal expression of grief and despair. Section 8. Acceptance and Decision. Embracing the Wasteland. He spent the night in the shelter, surrounded by strangers brought together by a shared tragedy. He listened to their stories, stories of loss, of fear, of the unknown. And as he listened, a strange sense of peace began to settle over him. He realized that there were no answers to his questions, no explanations for the unexplainable. The world had changed and he was alone. Or was he? He remembered the deserted park, the abandoned cars, the empty houses. The world was a wasteland, yes, but it was a wasteland that stretched far beyond this small town. And somewhere out there in that vast, desolate landscape were his friends. He could feel it in his heart, a faint echo of their laughter, a whisper of their voices on the wind. They were out there, somewhere, and he would find them. He had to. He made his decision. He wouldn't stay in the town, clinging to the remnants of a world that no longer existed. He would embrace the wasteland, the unknown, the uncertainty. He would find his friends, even if it meant searching until the end of time itself. Section 9. Transformation, joining his friends. The next morning as the sun rose over the ruined town, he said his goodbyes and stepped out into the wasteland. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew that his past was gone, that the world he once knew was lost forever. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. He carried his friends with him, in his heart, in his memories, in the very essence of his being. He would find them. And when he did, they would face the unknown together, just as they always had. As he walked, he felt a strange sensation, a tingling in his fingertips, a lightness in his chest. He looked down at his hands, and as he did, he saw them begin to fade, to turn translucent, to become like dust. He was changing, transforming, becoming a part of this new world, this world of silence and dust. And as the last vestiges of his former self dissipated into the wind, he smiled. He was joining his friends, not in the world they had left behind, but in this new, strange, and ultimately unknowable reality. The wasteland had claimed him, but in doing so, it had reunited him with those he had lost. And in that moment, he knew that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there was still beauty, still hope, still the enduring power of friendship.